It's interesting how there's a double standard in the dating world, and there's a lot of unfairness in the professional world when it comes to how we kind of write people off at a glance and profile people and things like that. And of course, I've been thinking about this because I've been getting my dating profiles updated and then trying to be active on a couple of platforms there. And being new in town, I'm working on trying to find work. And what's been on my mind with this is, first of all, double standards, right? And a great example of this would be, there's a woman who has made a profile, and her dating profile says, I want a taller man because I'm short. All right. So fine, right? Like, you have whatever it is you want. That's fine. But then she says in the next line on the profile, I'm also curvy with extra pounds, and if you don't like that, then tough shit, basically. So let's get this straight. On one hand, you want the tall guy that's going to be, I don't know, probably, 6'2" football player guy, right? That's what you want. You also want that guy to accept the fact that you're fat. So there's that. See, people want a standard. They want to be able to pick what they want, but they also don't want other people to be equally selective in a different way. But that leads me to another issue which we face online, and that is the good part, which is that when you increase the availability of exposure online, you can kind of get the icebreaker part out of the way, right? Like if you go to a dating site, then obviously people are on there because they're looking for a partner, right? So you don't have to go through that, awkwardness of trying to like scope out somebody to see like, are they interested or are they available or whatever, or maybe you ask someone out and they're not into you and then it's awkward or whatever in person, right? So you don't have that, awkwardness, if you will, online. But you also have that tendency to have the bucket list of things that you expect, right? The guy that doesn't want a woman who's fat, and the woman who doesn't want a guy who's less than 6 feet tall. Well, that could be, as a general rule, your expectation, but it doesn't necessarily take into account the human element, right? Because not every woman who's not thin is going to be unattractive, right? There's personality, there's shared values, there's synergy and chemistry of all different sorts that can play a role. So if you're going to write somebody off just because they're a certain, they have a certain body mass or they have a certain political view on a dating profile or whatever it is, well, you miss the things that make that person who they are, right? Like, maybe somebody says, well, I don't date conservative people, or if you're a Trump supporter, don't reply, or if you're not you know, into LGBTQ plus rights, then, you know, don't talk to me or whatever it is. Like you've already started off on the front side by creating these kind of aggressive conditions, which reduce a person to a caricature. And it's very possible to just jump to the conclusion that you don't want anything to do with a person without ever giving them any kind of a real fair chance other than swipe right or swipe left. And that can be a problem. It leads to a cycle of superficiality in online engagements. But that's also not limited exclusively to dating. It's also true in the workplace. And I was thinking about that too, as I've been applying for jobs and things of that nature. And it's occurred to me, you know, it's great to be able to browse job listings and, you know, apply with the click of a button, and now your name is in the pool of applicants and, you know, you can be considered. But it also has occurred to me that, you know, there is no go into the office and say, hey, you know, I'm Josh, I'm looking for work. Can I talk to you about different positions? Like there is no place to go, you know. Like I was talking to my neighbor, and he was like, you know, because I told him I'm looking for work, right? And then we passed each other on the sidewalk, and he's like, you know, you got to make sure you're, you know, don't put it off, you know, get off your ass and be, you know, chasing things down. And he's right. But then I was thinking afterwards, you know, like, well, like what can I really do though? Like in reality, what can I really do? I mean, I can try to polish up my resume to the best of my understanding of how to do that. I can send emails from home. I can apply for some things from home. But other than that, like there is no go beat on the door of some place in person. Like it's just not how the world works anymore in an online age. But again, it comes down to, it's very easy if you're a recruiter or something to just go down the list and, you know, swipe left or whatever it is, right? Like you don't care about the human element. You don't really have any duty to appraise the character of a person beyond just a few lines of text on a profile. And sometimes it's true that first impressions are right. I have noticed that. But by the same measure, do we even really get a chance to make a first impression one way or another when it's not really in person? It's not really a shared space where you're looking someone in the eye and you're shaking their hand and all of that kind of stuff. You don't have that. You just have this, you know, online profile, and it all just feels kind of disingenuous. So I don't know what to do about it. I'm just talking out loud. It does feel like it's kind of a problem though. And then what do you do? Like then you just start, you know, mass applying, right? If it's a dating app, then you start messaging a bunch of different people, because it goes without saying that probably 9 out of 10 of the people you reach out to aren't going to reply at all. So if it goes without saying that they're going to ghost you, then you're probably not going to put any particular effort into one individual. You're going to just go down the list and start sending, you know, a bunch of messages to people, which cheapens it. Or if you apply for that job that you actually wanted and you don't really get given meaningful consideration, then what do? You start just applying for dozens of different things. And does that cheapen the experience? Well, yeah, it kind of does, because now you're saying, well, if quality doesn't matter, then I guess I'll just focus on volume. And that changes the entire dynamic by reducing people and reducing human interaction to a sort of a commodity that is up for trade. It's important for us to be good ambassadors. It's important for us to make an effort to care about the human element. And, you know, I was thinking about, for example, you know, I worked with the guy that I worked with, my old boss, for, you know, 10 years at least, right? And then my job gets sunset and eliminated. My role's gone. And, you know, he's gone too, right? And that's not to say that we're not friends still. That's not to say that I have anything, you know, a chip on my shoulder or anything like that. But it doesn't change the fact that, you know, I look at things like that and I sometimes think we will forget the actions of our enemies and we'll remember the silence of our friends. When people don't really go out of their way to help you when they can help you, when you don't need help, you know, then when the time comes when you do and they're silent, then you kind of remember that. You kind of notice that. And it increasingly becomes a thing where it starts to feel like it's important to let go of all of those sorts of relationships that try to demand that you go out of your way for them or that you meet some particular criteria while not really having any particular duty of stewardship to you. Just like the dating profile that says you've got to be, you know, a tall guy, and you've also got to accept the fact that the woman who's made this demand is obese. Well, it's fine to have standards, but if you're going to have standards and you're going to be selfish, then don't expect other people to make some sort of a sacrifice to treat you like an exception to the rule. If you're going to commoditize people and not really care how they feel or be invested in their personal growth or anything like that, then, you know, don't be surprised when they also treat you like you're kind of disposable too. Employers need to know that. People in the dating scene need to know that. As friends, we should be aware of this in all of our relationships, really. You know, it's interesting how a lot of people will say, you know, like, I will be there to sacrifice for you. I will, you know, I would lay down my life to protect you if I had to do that. You know, if you were in a really, really bad situation and you were abducted by terrorists, I would go in guns blazing and fight to the death to protect you. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But then there's the question of how likely is that to actually happen? Probably not. So what it comes down to is, you know, picking up the phone and calling a friend when you don't have anything to get out of it. That isn't something you're going to actually do. But you're willing to say in a hypothetical situation that you would make some sort of outlandish sacrifice. Well, you're not willing to give up your convenience for a moment. So why would you give up your life, right? And the reason why people make these kinds of promises is because they know it's a wager that is never going to be taken up. They're never going to be put in a situation where they have to actually follow through. So it's super easy to say, well, if you ever need anything, let me know. Okay, well, is anyone going to ever call you up because they need something? You know, probably not. It's a nicety, but it's not backed by anything substantive. And that's the problem in life too much. There's things that are, that sound good on paper, but they're not really meaningful if you dig a little bit deeper. You know, another thing that I've noticed on dating profiles, how many women there are that have made a dating profile, and maybe they've put a few pictures of themselves on there, and maybe they're good looking enough, like, you know, they're fine. Like, I don't know, maybe not drop dead gorgeous, but, you know, at least 6 out of 10 or better, right? They look fine. But then you look at the profile and you realize they haven't put a shred of actual text into it to describe themselves. They put zero effort into saying who they are, into writing something thoughtful that shows their personality, right? Or during a job hunt, you know, I go look at job postings and I see the description of the job. It says, like, you know, what is the job, and you know, what duties does it entail? And you can just at a cursory glance tell that whoever posted the job copy pasted some kind of text out of a template. The formatting isn't right, the punctuation isn't right, and it's all just totally canned content. It doesn't tell you anything about what the actual job really involves. It's not even thoughtfully formatted so that each sentence ends with the right punctuation. So you look at that and you think, well, you know, the recruiter posted the position, but they didn't apparently care enough to, you know, write something from the heart to describe what the job is. They didn't care enough to make sure that the formatting is correct when they posted it. Like, they just hit Control V and you know, copied and pasted it from, you know, something that they had saved or whatever, and then posted the listing, you know. But it comes down to, you know, how much effort do you put into recruiting, into trying to invest in showing other people that they're valuable to you? Because if you don't, if you want to be, you know, dating, but you don't want to, you know, put your effort into describing who you are, or you want to hire people, but you don't want to be bothered actually mentoring people or walking them through the steps of what it is that you're seeking in a candidate, you know, then sometimes it also comes down to level of effort on the part of people who want to be selected for something. When you combine a lack of effort with a desire to be passively anonymous so that you can ghost someone very easily, then it starts to feel kind of like everything's a little bit fake in a way, you know, especially as we go through all of the AI stuff and you look around the internet and you see more and more content where you can't even tell for sure if a person made the content or if it was like a chat bot or something that just generated some kind of slop and published it. Increasingly, things just feel more and more fake. People feel more and more fake. But there is a silver lining, and here's the silver lining. Maybe you do have to sift through more volume because the quality is lower, but the internet still gives us an opportunity to connect in ways that we wouldn't have been able to in the past. That's true. There's also the fact that when you're looking for things like a new relationship or a new job or something like that, it's important to remember you don't need a whole bunch of gold mines. All you really need is one. You need to find one that will be a keeper. And somebody said, even if 1% of the world, if 99% of the people in the world think I'm unattractive, that means 1% thinks that I am. And that's a lot of people, right? Like, that's a kind of an interesting way to look at it. Same thing though, like, you don't necessarily need to find a lot of quality. You just need to find some quality. And unfortunately, sometimes we do have to sort through more garbage and more noise than we would like to. And that is part of how life works. But we shouldn't be too discouraged by it either, because it's just, a little bit disconcerting, but it's not to say that you can't find meaningful things to commit to in life. You just have to kind of sift through a lot more rubbish to get to the good stuff. But I think about things like, in dating or something, like if you're not religious, you don't go to church, and you can't really meet people in your workplace, and you don't drink, then it can be hard to meet people in life without relying on some kind of online platform. And I do think that that's a positive, because as with all things, even if there's a negative element, there's still tools that we can leverage which can add value to our life. And there's a lot of amazing success stories where somebody has, met their partner online, or, applied for a job and walked into it blind, and then wound up having a lot of success. And decades down the road, they're still going strong. But it's also important, as we go through all of this, to remember the human element. Like, on the other side of a screen, there's a real person there. And a few lines of text on a web page doesn't sufficiently describe the depth of who a person is. On one hand, we need to make a point to show others who we are if we want to be seen. On the other hand, we need to remember that when we're looking, it's not about a specific criteria necessarily, because sometimes what's best for us is not going to be the thing that we would put at the top of our list of what we think we're looking for, right? Like you have your idea of what perfection looks like. Well, maybe the universe has a different plan too. And you need to be open to the fact that sometimes your perfect match isn't going to be exactly in line with what you thought perfect looks like. And be open to changing your mind, being open to being convinced, be open to trying new things and giving people a chance. Because if people are willing to put effort in, sometimes they don't have to be perfect to be a good fit. In any case, I'm sure we are all dealing with some variation of this sort of stuff in our lives, one way or another. So it's an interesting topic to think about and talk about. In any case, till next time, good luck on your adventure, and thanks so much.